All right, so before we jump into today's guest, I just want to give a little bit of a heads up. We are going to be talking about toxic relationships, thoughts of suicidal ideations or self harm, and mental health struggles, anxiety, depression, all of that kind of stuff. So if you find that you're getting overwhelmed, definitely please step back, take care of yourself, do what you need to do. And then I really invite you to come back when you feel ready and able and grounded because our guest today is amazing. She has some incredible insight and resources and is a huge, amazing resource. So I invite you to come back when you're able, but do what you need to do. Take care of yourself. That's of utmost importance. So let me introduce our guest to you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Healing Doesn't Have to Be Heavy podcast. I'm your host, Angie Barrett, and I am a trauma informed coach. I'm a play expert. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm also a child abuse survivor. I help women use play and movement to connect to their bodies, releasing limiting negative self beliefs, stress, anxiety, tension, depression, and trauma. And as I was on my own healing journey from childhood trauma, I just felt like healing was so heavy. And I felt like I was just slogging through mud. So, my goal with this podcast is to bring amazing resources to you, lights and beacons of hope on the journey, and to give you the tools and resources available to help you fill your toolbox with resources and hope. And I've brought you an amazing guest for that today. So Valerie Rubin is here with me. I'm going to let her introduce herself. And before we do that, I just want to give a slight disclaimer that we may talk, or we're going to go into talking about anxiety, mental health, and some feelings of self-harm or wanting to do to not be alive anymore. So if you get triggered, if you find that this is really starting to activate things for you, take care of yourself, step away, ground down, and then I invite you to come back when you feel ready because Valerie has some amazing insights and is just an incredible resource. So take care of yourself. Come back if and when you're able. And I'm going to turn the time over to her. So, Valerie, tell us all about yourself. And thanks for being here, by the
Hi.
way.
Hi, Angie. Thank you so much for having me on. I just love your energy already. I am an anxious attachment specialist and trauma-informed somatic coach. Ultimately, what that means is I help people heal their anxious attachment style so they can be a match for healthy and secure love. I've been doing this for 4 years now. I love it. It is my sole mission. It is my life's work to help people to truly cultivate that self-love, security, and safety from within and have that be reflected in their relationships is just miraculous to me. So that's a little bit about me.
Beautiful. I love it. Before we jump into your story, for anybody that doesn't know, can you explain what anxious attachment style is?
You got it. So ultimately, we all have an attachment style based on how we were wired and interacting with our caregivers. So, an anxious attachment style, what the symptoms look like is low confidence, codependency. I like to define codependency as if you're safe, I'm safe. If you're having a bad day, now I'm having a bad day. This could look like self doubt. This looks like feelings of jealousy, feelings, just chronic anxiety in relationships, feeling not able to validate your own self-worth, just invalidate yourself in general. Other symptoms of anxious attachment is just also like proximity seeking, feeling like I need to be close, like they crave closeness and connection. But sometimes this could look like protest behaviors of maybe pushing someone away because
Uh,
we have these behaviors that can feel overwhelming to someone else. So that's really what encompasses anxious attachment. But ultimately, anxious attachment is really just chronic anxiety, and it can be very triggered by relationships, whether that's familial relationships, romantic relationships, and business or job relationships. And we can have a different attachment to each of these areas of our lives. And attachment styles are not fixed, they are not permanent. With the right tools and guidance and somatic work, it's inevitable that you will develop the skills to develop a more secure attachment style, which means having healthier relationships, feeling safe and secure within your own body, being able to self-soothe, being able to have difficult and vulnerable conversations, not fearing conflict, just able to have a bigger capacity for discomfort, ultimately, is what a secure attachment means.
I love it. That is amazing. Okay, let's jump in. Tell us how you got started on this work. Tell us how you got started on this work.
Yeah, so two different stories of how I got started into this work. So I used to have chronic anxiety and an anxious attachment style. And what this looked like in my early 20s was I had chronic pain all over my body. It started with chronic headaches, chronic neck pain, and then sooner rather than later, it just encapsulated my whole body. I was doing all the right things. I felt like I was living in a 90-year-old's body. I was doing all the right things, doing yoga 5 days a week. I was going to a talk therapist for years. I was going to one for 4.5 years at that point. I even tried medication. I did all the things that were quote unquote supposed to do, all the right things, but I was still stuck. And then I discovered somatic therapy and hypnotherapy. And then within 6 months, the whole chronic pain went completely away. I also had cystic acne, like really, really bad. I had trichotillomania. I would like literally pull out my hair. It
Wow.
was just wild, the transformation that I've had. And it all has to do with all the suppressed emotions and not feeling good enough. So needing to prove my worth. That was just so encoded in my body and my nervous system. So then, of course, anxiety is going to be there. We're going to feel the need to overgive, to people please, so that we don't feel those feelings of inadequacy. And ultimately, people who are anxiously attached have that core wound of not feeling good enough, this core shame. So we have these compensatory behaviors to try and cover that up, to try and avoid those feelings. And it's not coming from our true adult self, it's coming from our younger self that was made to feel not enough, not important, insignificant, etc. So that's like one part of the story. And the second part of the story was something really deeply shifted for me. And I knew that the world needed this work because people who, in my work, that were struggling with anxious attachment and just anxiety in general, the people who weren't getting better were stuck in trauma bonds, toxic relationships, just had chronic anxiety in relationships. And so a really big turning point for me was, so my mom was together with my dad for over 30 years at that point, and they decided to separate. And so within that, uh, she started to show withdrawal symptoms. So if someone in the audience has went through a breakup or a divorce, you know how painful it is in the brain. The chemicals in your brain, it's the same thing that's happening as you're withdrawing from cocaine or
Yeah.
heroin. Like it's that intense when you're going through a breakup or a divorce. And so it feels so big. And so I noticed my mom saying statements, trigger warning, saying statements like, I want to die. And it was just gut wrenching to see that. And then now, as I've became more trauma informed, it's like, no, that wasn't because she just like loved my dad and it was her soulmate. It was literally because she was going through withdrawals from the chaos and the stress as she was in a trauma bonded relationship. And then she went back to him a few months later because it's too big to sit with. She didn't have that capacity for that. And so I realized this is so much deeper than just anxiety. This is about how we are wired to connect with people. And then I really went deeper into anxious attachment. And that's what I realized she had and what I had. And so all it takes is one person to shift that. And so, yeah, that's my story, those two parts.
That's amazing. What a journey to get you here, and it's so challenging. I just want to touch on the fact that when you talked about the breakup and when you break up and the withdrawal is like withdrawing from cocaine. That's I call that stress addiction. So it's withdrawing like from toxic relationships, stress, trauma. When you start to heal, your body has adjusted to that. I totally relate to that. I grew up as a child abuse survivor, and I went into nursing. Nursing was my field of work, but I had to work in the high stressful environments, emergency departments, ICUs, because I thrived on the chaos. And when things were calm, I felt unsafe. I wanted to peel my skin off. And so it is, if any of you are out there and have tried to leave a toxic relationship or tried to do something different and ended up going back, give yourself some grace, please,
So much
because
grace.
you're withdrawing from something that is as addictive as cocaine. And so I love that you brought that into it.
Mhm.
So talk a little bit more about how do you help people rewire, because it is so challenging and so addictive. How do you help people rewire and change that?
Mm-hmm.
Or navigate changing that, because it does not happen in a moment. Let me just put that out there.
You got it. You got it. So that's going to be my next point. So,
Hmm.
like Angie said, we become so addicted to stress, and there becomes a turning point with my clients. I have a signature 8-week program that walks you through how to heal your anxious attachment. But they're like right in the middle, around 6 weeks, when clients really start to see those shifts and they start to feel a lot less anxious. They're like, whoa, this is like really uncomfortable. This is
Mm.
really uncomfortable because your body is getting used to something completely different. And our nervous system, our brain hates change, even if that looks like good change, right? And so, how I really help rewire is two different things. It's the trauma healing and the somatics, how to become secure within. So, we have to first learn how to regulate our nervous system. I have specific tools for each state of the nervous system. So, there's 4 states: fawn, which is people pleasing slash codependency; flight, which looks like anxiety or OCD like symptoms; freeze, and depression. And then there is that anger fight response. And so, what might work in anxiety, in an anxiety response, like we have all this energy, is gonna you're going to need a different tool for anxiety versus if you're in freeze, shutdown, or depression, because in that state we have not enough energy. So it's first learning how to process our emotions and learn how to regulate our nervous system. And then another thing that I utilize is something called vagus toning. So we have something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve ultimately is the controller of our nervous system. When we've experienced chronic stress or trauma, it gets stuck on. So our bodies are made to regulate, to go into homeostasis, to relax. But when we have experienced chronic stress or trauma, it gets stuck in that response. So the vagus nerve, when we stimulate that nerve, what ends up happening is it turns on that relaxation response and it tells our body, okay, it's okay. I can turn that switch off now. So it's those two things is what we're starting with. And then I go into the somatic therapy. So I utilize somatic parts work, aka internal family systems. I also utilize brain spotting. And then also hypnotherapy. So for hypnotherapy, I really utilize that for rewiring our belief systems and our limiting beliefs, especially with anxious attachment. We have fears around being alone, fears that our partner will leave us, fears that we can't trust ourselves. I am not enough. So with hypnosis recordings, we want to also like heal the trauma, and that can feel heavy, but we also want to rewire and get used to expansive, these new calm experiences, so that we're not stuck in that survival. We're not stuck feeling uncomfortable with the calmness. So that's what the hypnosis recordings will do. I make custom ones for my clients. What are your goals? What do you want to feel? What is the person, the type of you who is securely attached? What does that look like, feel like? What do your relationships look like? And I will have them listen to that every single day. And what that does is that retrains your brain to look for evidence that this is your new reality. You will begin to feel differently. You will begin to behave differently. You will begin to attract different people. So that is also how we're expanding, rewiring, and then so somatic therapy. So brain spotting, it's very similar to EMDR. So with EMDR, we're looking at our finger going back and forth. With brain spotting, we're doing the same thing, except we're finding that brain spot. Meaning, for example, if our nervous system it is affected by where we look. So if you notice someone's looking up, down, to the side, they're processing something. So what brain spotting helps us do is it helps us to locate where the trauma memories are stored in our body and helps us to release them and process them. So that way we're not as triggered. This could look like now when your partner goes away on a business trip, you don't feel that anxiety like he's never going to come back. And we don't have to do much talking at all. It's all in the body, focusing on those sensations, those emotions that have been suppressed. Different memories, sensations can come up that we aren't even logically aware of. So that is what brain spotting is. And then somatic parts work. When we have an anxious attachment style or even an avoidant attachment style, we have different parts that have protected us from feeling pain. This could look like people pleasing, perfectionism, chronic anxiety, panic attacks, addictions, all these different aspects of ourselves, procrastination. All of these have been, we're taught that something's wrong with us. No, our nervous system is actually trying to protect you by having these parts. And so the part is literally looking for a need to be met because the need has not been met. So we use people pleasing, perfectionism to get that need met. And so when we integrate and heal that part and meet that need through parts work, then the body goes, well, whoa, I don't need to people please anymore. I don't need this perfectionism. I don't need to pretend like everything is fine and shoulder everything myself. So that is really the encompassing of my work. It's helping you to heal the trauma, but also to expand into this new version of yourself.
I love so much of what you just said, and I have 1,000 questions and a million thoughts running through my head. So I'm super excited about that. I want to start with the somatic parts work, or the IFS, internal family systems. I did IFS. That's the theoretical framework that my therapist worked on or utilized as I was working through therapy. And explain a little more about parts work for people that don't understand it. Just because when I started working with her, it was like mind blown. Because I've always said part of me feels this, but then when we're stuck in an emotion, it feels like it's all of you, it's all encompassing. And yet being able to separate that out and realize that there are parts that feel a certain way, and it doesn't have to be my whole being became just this expansive, you use that term, but life-changing, expansive way of living, to be able to say part of me and really realize that it is only part of me. It doesn't have to be my core self. So talk a little more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad you did that with your therapist. IFS is so life-changing. So so we have different parts of us. So we have our true adult self, that's like in the middle. This is our higher adult self. She feels capable, she feels trusting. I can do anything that I put my mind to. That is our true adult self. Then we have our younger self. This is the parts of us that feel not worthy, I am not enough, shame, not good enough. So then our brain comes up with coping mechanisms or parts to protect us from feeling that way. In IFS, we call them managers. This looks like overthinking, anxiety, it looks like, drinking. It looks like perfectionism, people pleasing. These are some managers. Overworking, overgiving. Those are some protectors. These parts of us are trying to protect us from feeling that inner child's pain. And then we have something called firefighters. So firefighters put out the fire, that internal shame, as quick as possible. This looks like suicidal ideation, self-harm. This looks like panic attacks. This looks like addictions, binge eating. These are things that put out the fire the quickest. So that's ultimately what the different parts of IFS is. But ultimately what we are doing is we're finding those protector parts, or those firefighters, seeing what need they're meeting, and then we're showing ourselves a new way of being. We're showing what need is this meeting, and then how can my adult self meet that need? What does my higher adult self need from me so that I don't feel the need to go into perfectionism, over-explaining, people pleasing,
binge eating, whatever.
eating, etc. Absolutely.
I love it. And just for anybody out there who's not familiar with IFS, the movie Inside Out was actually based on the
Yes.
theoretical framework. It was helped designed by the guy who came up with this IFS theory. So, an Inside Out is a great kids' way to understand IFS. So, we all have parts. So, definitely go watch the movie Inside Out, part one and two, because it does help explain this concept of having parts and who's in control is determined based on what you feel. So I want to go a little more
Yes.
into that. So for
Yes.
me, one of the big things as I was working on healing, one of my wounds that I had to struggle with was the idea that I had to be small because in order to be big, that's when I got hurt based on my child abuse. And so one of my wounds was I had to be small. So everything I did was to try and keep me small. And for me, the work that I did when I started working with play and somatic work is I pretended to be an elephant. So I got to feel what it felt like to be big without my nervous system saying, oh my gosh, danger, danger, shut down. And so talk a little more into that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, there's different parts of us, right? Like for me, mine also used to be I have to be small. And it was so unconscious. And it was brought out this past week. I was in California. It was this event called Energetics of Business, and we did a lot of energetic work. And all of these women are business women, right? And we're all mindset coaches, somatic coaches, all into this type of work, right? So all of them are encouraging me to be big, to show up with my gifts. And I didn't even realize that I myself was under that notion that I have to be small. And so I feel like as I've come out of that and come back to my hometown here in Ohio, I feel like I've completely outgrown it. But that is another part. These parts of us are literally just trying to help us survive in ways that we should have never had to survive. For me, almost like it was this was a part of mine is it was very normalized for me to stay small, to stay silent. I've always had a very big personality, like very bold, very straightforward. And I had a narcissistic father. I also have an autistic brother. So my family was full of chaos and dysfunction. And so I learned I need to not take up space. I need to not be a burden because it adds to the stress. I learned that I had to be small. I learned that I couldn't take up space or trust myself, not because I was choosing that, because I was forced to be in that role. This is another way that parts work can really, really help you. It's just to really heal those traumas underneath it and show your inner child a different experience. And so in my IFS sessions, there's inner child healing component there where our higher adult self will attune to this child. What made you believe that you had to be small? Going back to this little girl or boy, giving them the words of encouragement, giving yourself that hug, showing your inner child maybe safe people in your life that allow you to be big, allow you to take up space. And so this is another example of how IFS can be incredibly, incredibly healing. And Inside Out is also such an amazing movie. I fucking love that movie.
I watch it all the time. And when I'm starting to
So
feel
good.
really like stuck in a certain feeling or emotion, I go back and watch it because then I'm reminded, oh, no, wait, I can relax. This is a part. I get to acknowledge this part and then they'll move on once I meet that need. Yeah, I love it.
Mm,
It's one of the best movies. I own both of them. Well, they're both one of the best movies.
love that.
So I love it. By the way, I could talk for hours about IFS. But Valerie, talk to us a little bit about when you are healing, it's going to be heavy, right? So working through some of the stuff is going to be heavy. And yet, how do you help clients and how did you on your own journey find that light, that hope, or those moments of, okay, this doesn't have to be so bad?
Mm. I look at it this way. It's in my body, whether I like it or not, and it feels heavy unconsciously. I might as well bring it up to the surface. Like, fuck. But for me, what first came to my mind of finding that light is just my best friend Emily.
Uh,
When we went to California, we decided that we're gonna move to Tulum, Mexico for a month and just see how it goes. And I just think about my life there and I just think of her. Like she is so much of also who I want to step into. She has parts that I haven't discovered yet within myself that I'm trying to embody and that I'm working on embodying. And that just like came to my mind is I feel like thinking of your higher self, whether that's through a person. For me, I feel like my higher self, her name is fully expressed. That's what I'm stepping into, fully expressed. It's like tuning into that, tuning into what are your dreams? For me, like doing this work on myself, it's literally like I have to be the embodiment of that for my clients. Like it's like almost like there's no choice, not in a bad way, but it's like I get to be this person. I
Yes.
get to show up differently. I get to show up for myself and my clients in a different way. It's like, what is your why for doing this? This might not be your business, but maybe you want to be a more present parent. Maybe you want to be a more present partner. Maybe you want to end the cycle of toxic relationships. Maybe you've come from a long line of parents who have been divorced or in toxic relationships and you realize, hey, I'm in a toxic marriage and I want to leave. That is fucking courageous, right?
Yeah.
Whether you have kids, showing up for them in a different way, you're ending generational cycles, you're ending generational trauma. And I'm also so fucking passionate also about helping parents in that way, because if you know how to regulate yourself, you will be a completely different parent for your child or children. And so this is the most sacred, important work that there is. So fucking sacred and so important. And so I think it's finding your why and connecting to that. It's like, what do you want in your life? Maybe there are certain protector parts, like a thriving business or a romantic partner, a healthy relationship. Maybe it's like, I want that desire, but I have to heal these different parts of myself so that it feels safe to step into that. It's all about that. What is your why? Maybe you want to have closer, deeper, loving friendships. It's like stepping into your why. I think that is how you find that light, and also making, like you said, Angie, making time for play.
Yes.
For me, it's coloring and
Mhm.
journaling. I'll journal to my inner child. Like even last night, I could feel my inner child was really anxious, and I just literally sat and held myself in a hug all
Mhm.
night. And it's like, I just felt my body relax. It's like, how can I bring some play? How can I bring some joy? Like, my friend Emily, she's like, life be lifing. And I'm like, that's right. Like, life be lifing. So it's like, how can we bring that out? Like, what if it doesn't have to be heavy? What if it's like, I can also focus on how this is bringing me joy? I can also focus on my amazing friendships. I can also focus on the nice walk that I get to experience with even 1% more presence. How can I build upon that? Find it ultimately finding your why and finding those things that bring you joy. That could be singing, dancing, coloring, anything that your inner child finds joyful. Before we were brainwashed that we have to do, do, do.
I love that you said that. And you said something before we started recording that I'm going to touch on now. You were talking about your friend who's your inspiration. For some of us who have severe childhood trauma, I'm talking about myself, and others that I know and have worked with, we can't attach to a person yet, feeling that safety with the person. And you mentioned earlier attaching to an animal. My dog was my why, or is
Yeah.
was my why for a long time, because she was you can kind of see her for those of you watching the video, she's off on the bed, the little black blob. But she was my why. She was the only place that I felt safe for a long time. So just know if you aren't able yet at this point in your journey to attach to a person or to find safety in a person, totally normal. Animals can be
Absolutely.
that spark of joy. And you had mentioned that before we started talking. So I just wanted to bring that in.
Yes. Yes. Especially like my cat was also my why. Like at one point a few years ago, I was in a really dark place. And my cat Oscar like definitely saved my life. Like it's
Mhm.
totally okay if a person you don't feel safe attaching with. This could also be like the beach. Like
Yes.
the beach or the mountains, like what's a place when you visualize it helps you to feel safe, even 1% more safe. And it's like attuning to that, being out in nature. Nature is a way that we co-regulate. So these are all their ways that it doesn't have to be a person, it could be an animal, nature, outdoors.
I love that. Water is also my flowing water. So streams, the ocean, rivers, that was my safe place where I would go when I felt really unsafe. So just know, if you don't feel safe with people, totally fine. That's part of the journey for many of us who don't feel safe with people.
Mhm.
Absolutely. All right. So, Valerie, anything else that you want to leave our listeners with? This has been amazing. And by the way, if you don't have anything else, just go watch the movie Inside Out. That is one of the bright spots for me because it also does give me that moment of joy and help with IFS and give you an entry into what Valerie's work is, although she does it in different modalities. Anything else you want to leave our listeners with?
You are so not alone. That's just what comes through for me is when we are very anxiously attached, we feel so alone in it. We feel like something's wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. That you have literally just been conditioned to believe that. Every baby has been born securely attached and feeling worthy. We have just encapsulated experiences, memories, conditioning that tells us otherwise. You are enough exactly as you are. And I know some of your protector parts might be saying you're full of shit. You don't
Yeah.
know who I am, but know that that is conditioning and we can rewire, we can relearn, we can expand into a bigger, different version of us. It is always possible if you have the right tools and the right guidance and has someone who has walked the walk and can talk the talk with you. And I, right, this is the first time I've publicly promoted this, but I'm thinking of doing a group program for people to heal anxious attachment. But there's also going to be a hybrid one-on-one component because one-on-one work is so deeply
Yes.
sacred because we heal in community and we heal through coaches, therapists, friendships, support. And so I really desire to be in that space, helping people through that. You know, you are so not alone. And I share that because we're all walking each other home.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you. Um,
You.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you my two questions that I ask everybody at the end of an interview. So if you could wave a magic wand, looking back on your journey, what is one thing that you would change if you could?
Honestly, at first, when you asked me that before we started recording, I thought of like changing my money situation, but honestly, I wouldn't change a thing
Okay.
because every single life experience, struggle, stressor in my life has brought me to this moment and is taking me to my true adult self. It's anchoring me back into that. So I honestly wouldn't change anything.
I- That's fantastic. I love that. And that is a great way to look at, looking back on your things to see or on your life to see how it's gotten you to where you are. I love that. So then I'm going to ask you kind of the opposite so that if we talked in 12 months, we sat down and talked, where would you want your healing journey, your life journey to be that it's not now?
I would say I would love to do in-person work. I would
Okay.
love to do group coaching containers.
Hmm.
I would love to be in a different spot, either that's country or state. That's not Ohio. So I would say those would be my things that I would love to change and expand into.
I love it. Amazing. Beautiful. So if our listeners want to get in touch with you, how would you recommend they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, I would say Instagram. My Instagram is literally Heal with Val, or I have my podcast as well called the Anxiety Recovery Podcast with Valerie Rubin. I have expert leaders, people who are also in this space to share their journeys, share insights on healing from chronic anxiety, anxious attachment, and how to have healthy relationships after trauma. So I would also love that. And Angie, I would love for you to be on as well.
Thank you. Yes, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. So yeah, we will drop all of Valerie's contact info. Go check her out on Instagram. Go check out her podcast because she clearly is an amazing resource, has tons of valuable insights. And so definitely go check her out. And so we'll drop her contact info in the show notes. And then also, as my gift to you listeners, if you are feeling like you're having a hard time, you're struggling being in your body, I'm also dropping a link in the show notes for my free, short, less than 5 minute playful movement sequence to help you release some of that anxious energy, that stress, and come back to a state of calm. So that link is also in the show notes. Go grab that. You can do it. I do it regularly, generally at least 2 times a day, because I have a lot of anxiety and energy. So just know it's a great way to help with that. And thank you for listening. Definitely check out our next episode. Tune in. And until next time, we'll see you later.